Welcome back to the 13th annual Halloween special. Tonight we're talking about a classic film directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Came out in 1963, stars Tippi Hedren, Rod Taylor, Jessica Tandy, and Veronica Cartwright. The Birds. A wealthy San Francisco socialite pursues a potential boyfriend to a small Northern California town that slowly takes a turn for the bizarre when birds of all kinds suddenly begin to attack people. Just to let you know, there are going to be some spoilers for The Birds. If you've never seen it, it's great. You should check it out, but that's your warning. When I was younger, my mom was very excited to introduce me to The Birds. This was one of the very few times where I was allowed to watch things like this, like Psycho, for instance, another Hitchcock movie, because for my mom, it was one of her childhood favorites, and she got to then share it with her son. The first time I saw The Birds, I'm pretty sure it was on the AMC network on TV, and I have a very clear memory of that event because there are multiple scenes that stuck out to me, moments that were seared into my brain that at that young age felt truly horrifying. One in particular might actually be one of the first moments, if not the first moment, where my very young mind took note of the edit and the way a film was shot. And it's a scene where Tippi Hedren is sitting in front of a schoolhouse, and the kids inside are singing, and that song in the back of the mix starts to get really creepy and ominous. Behind her, you notice that a few birds are landing on a jungle gym, and then eventually we follow one bird, panning with it all the way to a jungle gym that is absolutely filled with birds. Other than the birds chirping, there's no sound effect letting us know we're supposed to be scared. There's no musical sting. In fact, there's no musical score in the entire film, and when you commonly work with Bernard Herrmann, telling him to sit down for a whole movie, that's a bold choice. And yet, as a little kid, probably about 6 or 7 years old, watching this for the first time, I remember that moment having a massive impact on me. The Birds has an interesting legacy because it's still regarded as a classic, as it should be, but it's not compared in quality to some of his best films like, say, Psycho. Some of that could be due to its first hour, which is more of a cute romance that has the occasional setup of something more sinister going on, or to its quote-unquote dated effects that no longer convince in certain sequences. Because the truth is, the vast majority of the birds and the usage of them in the film still works incredibly well because there are tons of real birds that are pecking away at these actors' hands and faces. And I want to talk about that idea of dated effects or effects that don't hold up anymore because I see it often when people talk about movies even from the 90s or early 2000s. And I'm sure I've said a variation of that in my reviews over the years, but the truth is, I don't ever knock a movie for having effects that haven't held up well. Yes, you can acknowledge it and you can see that something, could look better now, or there's a better technical process to achieve a sequence now that we have come up with since then. But I would never, ever downgrade a film just because the effects are dated. Because it's charming. It's something of the era. It's why I never want filmmakers to go back and release, 30 years later, special editions or changed editions of their movies that have really massive changes. I'm not talking about when David Fincher changes the color or adds some clouds to a shot. I'm talking about, the 97 Star Wars. Because there's something really charming and quaint about watching a film use all of the technology of its era to tell its story. And Hitchcock did that brilliantly with this. Beyond the genre element here, the bird attacks, there's a really great romantic setup between Tippi Hedren and Rod Taylor. They have amazing chemistry. The dialogue is really crisp. It's very cute how she goes way out of her way, literally 60 miles out of her way, just to deliver some lovebirds to his house, basically as a prank. I mean, she is super committed to it. And her being as good as she is in the movie and working so well as she does with Rod Taylor, regardless of whatever was going on with Hitchcock behind the scenes, because we've all heard stories for years about how he treated his actors, her being that good in the movie is such a great assist to her character because she is a socialite who kind of hangs out with people. She has a rich dad. She does some charity work. And besides that, she's basically just lusting after a guy she met one time. Not the most interesting character, but Hitchcock makes her super interesting, and Tippi Hedren's performance does too. We can also thank this movie for Birdemic. And I do mean thank, because if you've ever seen Birdemic, you have experienced a joy unlike any other. The other moment that's always been seared into my subconscious since I was a little kid is this moment where Jessica Tandy visits a house and finds a man with his eyes gouged out. and Hitchcock does 3 shots going from a wide to a medium to a close-up super quick. Right there in that scene is where the idea of not having a score throughout the entire film really pays off to me, because you expect it there, and when you don't get it, everything that came before it, the lack of music, there's no romantic music, there's no like cliche 1950s, 1960s romantic swooning score. But when we get to that moment and we're so used to having a sting and we don't get it, it really sinks in differently. I think what most people remember about The Birds, though, is its final 30 to 40 minutes, this house sequence that is so tense, where they're trapped in this house, they've boarded up the windows, they constantly hear birds flying around outside. Sometimes they get in, sometimes they're able to force them away. And the action that's accomplished with these birds is very convincing, to a point where I feel like there would be some animal rights issues nowadays if you saw it in a film, but it all looks very realistic. There's this great scene where she creeps up to the attic and finds a bunch of them up there and they attack her. That is very much so Hitchcock's answer to his own shower scene in Psycho, except this time it's with birds. Apparently the way he was able to keep the birds coming towards her was they were actually tied to her by nylon string, so they couldn't even get away. This sequence also took a very long time to film, about a week, and there are very few scenes out of the entire 1960s decade as suspenseful as the final few minutes where they creep out of this house passing by a bunch of birds that are just sitting there. The whole time you're wondering if they're going to attack. Even a small little bite from one that's on the porch railing is enough to startle you. He is one of the most influential filmmakers that has ever existed. He certainly inspired me. He inspired many of my favorite filmmakers like M. Night Shyamalan, who mentioned that The Birds was a big influence on Signs. And when you watch the last 30 minutes of Signs and the last 30 minutes of The Birds, you can see why. Guys, thank you so much as always for continuing to watch the 13th annual Halloween special. Look forward to more videos very soon. And if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.